beings of the universe. If you clicked on this video, that means that you exist. Please continue to exist. This will be a live commentary, gameplay, video, essay where I will be discussing why I personally believe we are living through the greatest period in gaming. I realize that may be a controversial statement, but it is my opinion. We will now begin this Tier 1 raid while I discuss my thoughts. We will start with microtransactions, the most controversial topic of all. I personally feel that microtransactions are a positive thing in video games today. It allows the developer to maintain revenue and maintain basically to eat, to continue living, to make a living, where the game market is very saturated, where the player base may come and go from various titles. Whenever the newest game comes out, the newest big title, they'll move on to that one. You do not have too many loyal player bases anymore. So when you do have loyal player bases, you want content to keep being released, and all of that content cannot be free. So in terms of things that introduce a pay-only wall, believe me, I'm against that. Like the situation that happened with Star Wars Battlefront 2, or was Battlefront 1, I don't know which one, I'm not too familiar with it, where there was no play wall. If you played for 100 hours, you still couldn't play as Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker. You had to pay for the DLC to play as those iconic characters. Believe me, I do not agree with microtransactions in the sense that way. I agree with microtransactions in the sense that the core player base has content that they want added, and the developer cannot add all of that content for free, especially in a saturated market like this, where the player base moves on to the newest Call of Duty or the newest season of Fortnite. There's not too much congruency with player bases today, and that allows certain items that are special, certain missions that are special, to still earn the developer revenue, which is important. These people are artists, they're not business people. They're artists who also are very skilled engineers. I absolutely believe in supporting the developer, and I think microtransactions are a great way to support the developer. Again, I believe in paywall and playwall. I don't believe in paywall only, where you have to pay to unlock the character. I believe in allowing the player to choose whether they want to spend the time in the game or whether they don't want to spend the time and spend some money. I think that's a fine option. Moving on to gameplay, the amount of innovation that has happened in games in the last 10 years, in the last 5 years, is absolutely stunning and excellent in my opinion. Whether you're a fan of the Star Trek IP, whether you're a fan of the Star Wars IP, the Matrix IP, Van Helsing, Warhammer, whatever universe you enjoy, for aesthetic reasons, for story reasons, whatever universe you enjoy, there's a third-person shooter for you. There's a first-person shooter for you. There's a strategy game for you. There's a role-playing game for you. The amount of variety and player choice when it comes to the different video games available on the market today is unprecedented. So I think that if a developer has to implement some sort of paid system or paid option for players, whether that's expanding the player choice and keeping the core player base there with new content, or whether that's allowing people to choose if they want to spend the time or the money to unlock certain items, I have no problem whatsoever with microtransactions. I think it's honestly a positive addition to the game, and I think it improves the experience of the developer and of the player base, Anyways, going back to the gameplay, I got off a tangent then, talking about microtransactions again. Going back to gameplay. The gameplay innovations that have happened and the fusions that are happening with different titles. You have titles like the one that you're seeing me play right now with the auto aim off. I'll give proof of that in a second. I should have given proof of that at the beginning of this video. I'm so skilled at this title that many people debate whether or not I'm playing with the auto aim off. I need to give proof of that in a minute after these enemies are cleared out. The amount of fusion games that are happening, going back to what I was saying before, where it's a third-person shooter or a first-person shooter fused with an RPG or fused with another genre of game. We had that game Disintegration come out recently, that sci-fi game set in the far future with the robot game, where it was a first-person shooter fused with an RTS. We have so much innovation happening. Even if some of that innovation is awkward, there's so much innovation happening right now in gaming. The technology is there, the developers are there, and I absolutely think that great things are happening with video games right now. Let's move on to story. I would like to address this because this is a very personal thing and it differs from individual to individual. I personally do not mind when games are heavy on gameplay and light on story, much like the Dynasty Warriors series, the Gundam series, and the traditional Dynasty Warriors series, you know? Very light story, almost kind of tongue-in-cheek, cartoony story, but very solid gameplay, very solid gameplay mechanics, solid leveling mechanics, you know? Basically everything else about the game except the story is solid, and I don't mind that at all. And I think that's the spot that we're at in terms of stories in video games. You know, every few years you have a big Star Wars game come out, you have a big Halo game come out, or a big Gears game, which continues the story of that IP, you know? But other than that, there's really no new IPs that are story-based. Everything is gameplay-based, and I personally like that as a person who enjoys gameplay. That's a personal opinion. If you don't agree with me, please let me know in the comments down below. But to sum it up again, I'd just like to say I think this is one of the greatest periods, if not the greatest period, in modern gaming. I absolutely do remember the days when a game would launch and everything would be on the disc. There would be no glitches. There would be no, little hiccups in the game or bugs or whatnot, you know? Times change and games change. You are not dealing with a 1 gigabyte file anymore. You are dealing with a hundreds of gigabyte file, which has an inordinate amount of minutia and data and little things that need to be put in it just the right way to make it to work. Look at Cyberpunk 2077, how that launched. It had an awkward launch, and now it is on top of the world. I really like the way that developers are able to continually update the game, you know, whereas before every few months you would just see a 1 megabyte update. Now every 2 weeks we get a 30 gigabyte update. A lot of people do not like that. Personally, I like that. I like seeing new things added to the game on a regular basis. I like to see new weapons added to the game on a regular basis. And if the developer wants to introduce a paywall for some of those, I'm fine with that, as long as there is a play wall along with that. As long as they don't do what happened with Battlefront, where you have to pay for the item. You know, there's no option to play through it. I don't agree with that, system of microtransaction, but I absolutely agree with others. Going back to the last major thing I'd like to talk about in this video, which is peer-to-peer monetization. I absolutely think that what's happened with the Counter-Strike title is a perfect example of how other developers should model their peer-to-peer monetization. Look at this character design here. I absolutely love this character design. Look at this. This is incredible. Anyways, going back to peer-to-peer monetization, I really enjoy how after you've spent 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, you know, grinding a specific arena, grinding a specific level or a specific enemy, and when you earn that item, whether it be a piece of armor, whether it be a melee weapon or an ability, I really like how there is a player market for that, you know, and it's built into the game, or there's a closely associated third-party website, you know, that you're able to go on there and translate that to real-world currency. I realize that morally people have objections to that, you know. Personally, I do not. I like when an item that I have earned, when a ability that I have earned, a piece of armor that I have earned, you know, I like when that has a real in-game value and then has a real out-of-world and reality value that translates to real-world currency. I don't think that's a bad thing, and I think it expands the player base, you know, to people who are not just playing the game exclusively to play it and have fun, people who are there to make a living, you know, and I really like that. I think it brings a very real-world diversity to games and a very real-world realism, you know. There's people playing in here, there's people working in here. It's not just a video game, it's changing, you know. It's almost like a digital online space where many types of people come together, you know, to accomplish different activities, whether that's monetization driven or entertainment driven, you know. It's like a giant chat room or something. And I realize that many people want games to only be fun. They don't want them to have any type of monetization to them. I personally do not agree with that. I like being able to have a real-world value associated with items I earn in-game. Not for any type of monetary reason, like, oh, look at how much, this is a $5 gun or this is a $10 gun. Just to have the option, if I wanted, to sell it or interact with other players, you know, for somebody who wanted to buy my gun. Or maybe I didn't want to spend 14 hours grinding a specific piece of armor, and I can directly contact different people and bid on that item, just like eBay. I really, really like how games are starting to introduce this, you know, and controversially, I would also like to say I support NFTs in game, as long as it is not done in a morally inappropriate way, like what happened with Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront, where there's no option whatsoever to unlock the character. You have to pay for it, and it's an iconic character like Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker or Boba Fett and whatnot. You know, you have to pay for these characters. I really don't like when monetization is introduced like that, but when there's a play wall and a paywall given, I absolutely support it. And going back to the NFT thing, I absolutely like when there is NFTs in games because it allows the player base to earn money, it allows the developer to earn money, and morally, I realize many people may have issues with these things, but I think it's innovation happening, and I realize it is awkward at several points, you know, the way developers implemented it, like what happened with Breakpoint, Ghost Recon Breakpoint. I believe that was definitely an awkward implementation of that, but I do not object at all to NFTs in games like I see people objecting to, you know, to microtransactions in games. I have no problem whatsoever when developers want to implement this. I think the core player base enjoys it, and I think that the developer can continue earning money from their player base, even if it's a small player base, because they decided to move on to a different franchise. Because people move on to the biggest, you know, new season of Fortnite, or people move on to the biggest, newest Call of Duty, and the developer is left in the dust. I think that microtransactions and NFT provide a viable income source for developers after the large player base has left and the core player base stays. Thank you for watching the video today. If you enjoyed and you agreed with the comments I made, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you disagreed, please be kind and let me know in the comments down below. Beings of the universe, if you are currently existing, please continue to exist. Have a wonderful evening, afternoon, or morning. Thank you for watching the video. Goodbye.